Welcome back to Light Talk, where the paranormal and the supernatural is a part of our everyday life. Do you have a story you'd like to share? Email me at lighttalk423 at gmail.com. And while you're at it, click on the like, share, and subscribe buttons down below. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started today. We've got a fantastic guest for you. So we're going to hand the mic over and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hey. Yeah, just go ahead and let us know who you are and what you do, and we'll get started.
Sure, sure. So my birth name is Vijay Ramanathan, but I took on the name Vegas K. Jarrow in 2024. I'll get to that story in a second. But to give a little background, I have a two-time master's degree winner. I did my first degree in library science and spent 15 years in the library system. And then I did my second degree in clinical mental health counseling in 2021. And I'll go over that story in a second. But I'm also enrolled in a PhD program right now at Saybrook University, where I'm going to be studying the mythopoetics of mental illness and looking at the kind of paranormal aspects of mental illness or the intuitive aspects of mental illness, intuitive arts and intuition and how that works and how that kind of connects to what we traditionally call pathological states. Um, so now my stories have I have like three or four stories of like precognitive visions where I was able to see kind of some aspect of the future and kind of digest it prior to knowing that thing. Um, Now the first story has to do with in 1998 when I was 20. A friend of mine called me to a meeting in Huguenot Library in Staten Island, New York, where I grew up in Staten Island. And he was like, "Oh, pitch me he wanted to write a movie with me, a screenplay idea." And he was like, "I'll pitch you the $1 million idea coming out of you right now." And I pitched him the idea for Lost, which is a TV show that premiered in 2004. And the pitch was like it took us like 30 or 40 minutes to work out, but we pretty much mapped out the show as it stood in 2010. Like it was like till the end of the show, we had mapped out the basic trajectories and the idea that the plane crashes an island and the island is mysterious. It's kind of like a Twilight Zone. We even said some of the catchphrases. Um, we even mentioned some of the controversies and catchphrases that the show later on highlighted, such as he was like saying, "Are they in purgatory?" And I was like, "No, they're not." So we discussed that aspect of it. And I said, and I incorporated that into the ending, that question. So we very much were attuned to the trajectory of the show, even though I had a few objections as we were hammering it out. I had a few objections to some of the most controversial twists. Um, I guess I'll spoiler alert this. This is already like 10 years after it's gone. But Locke, the character Locke, who I considered like the man of faith, who I was calling the man of faith, who had been healed, I specified by the island, that he would be redeemed and that he would be, his dead body would come to the island and he would be resurrected. But my friend was like, "Oh, dead is dead. You can't do that." And I was like, "Okay, maybe the antagonist, the smoke monster, takes over his body." So I was like, I was like kind of hesitant about that. And I was kind of like, I don't know if that's the best methodology because I like the smoke monster as like a animal of the island, animalistic qualities of the island, the animistic qualities of the island. But then we ended up settling on that in our treatment. And then I was like, "Oh, we should present this to ABC because they did, Twin Peaks. They might be open to like an experimental show." And I was like, "We should bring this to ABC and like try to pitch it." And he was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's too much work and there's a lot involved, write the whole Bible out and all this kind of thing." So he demurred. He said, "Forget it." And I was kind of half joking. I was like, "This show comes out, I'll know you sold it." And he's like, "No, no, it'll just be a coincidence." So I think it was a coincidence because I met him afterwards and he doesn't seem to really remember it. So I don't think he sold the show. Obviously, it'd be quite a controversy if he did. But I remember this episode because when I watched the show in 2005, a year after it premiered, I was like overwhelmed by the fact that it was like very much attuned to my idea. But then also I was kind of a little bit scared because I was like, oh, this is too big a coincidence. And I kind of repressed the memory. And I remember the moment I repressed it, I go, there's a voice comes to me and he's like, and the voice is like, you'll have an opportunity to tell the story down the road. You'll remember it again. And in 2016, I did remember it again. I remember that voice saying that. And then in 2018, I was like, oh, maybe I could try this again. Maybe I could try this vision boarding again. So I tried the vision boarding again. And I visioned a friendship who would help me take my game to the next level. And I imagined a friend entering my life, and I had all the specifics mapped out, and I had all these specifics, like very intimate details of our friendship. And I was like, as we're going to be countering a global crisis. So I kind of like was able to see the pandemic as well in 2018. And I was like, oh, there's going to be a big global crisis. And, I was able to like envision the next few years of my life. And I was going to change trajectories to get another degree. Well, I didn't really have that vision, but I was like, something's gonna happen. It's changing my trajectory, my career, this friendship. So it ended up happening exactly like that. In 2021, I ended up enrolling in Europa University for the clinical mental counseling degree because of the inspiration of this friend and her mentor, who ended up becoming my mentor. And I should note that my family grew up with Sathya Sai Baba, who's a guru in India. He died in 2012 and or 2011, and he was a guru who lived in India who was like into supernatural things. He's a manifestation, and he created ash, a sacred ash out of nothing. He was like a real life guru who like believed in that kind of thing. So we were very much a spiritual family and very much interested in the line between the spiritual and the supernatural. Um, so that's pretty much the two major stories. And then any questions on that I could take. And then I could go into the next story. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was really interesting. How did you do the manifestation of it? How did you get the writing, the board writing?
Well,
How did that come about with you?
I never recorded any of it. So it's not really it's quite a like for example with the time we mapped out loss, we were taking very bare notes. It was mostly just talked out. It was like very scanty notes I took, very basic notes I took. I couldn't find that paper years later. I tried to find the paper I wrote the notes on, but I couldn't find it. It was got lost to time. But the process of the vision boarding in 2018, well, it also overlaps with mental illness because I was basically talking to myself in my room. And I was kind of negotiating with the universe, if you were, as it were, the way I understand it. I was like, oh, then I'm going to meet so and so, and and very specifics of the relationship was spelled out. Um, and it's going to be like a good friendship, and we're going to exchange memes and all this kind of thing, and all these different things about this kind of thing, which I forgot about when we actually met her. When I actually met her, I forgot all about that. So I wasn't like thinking about that consciously when the memory comes in and out. Like for me, memory comes in and out. Sometimes like with these kind of extreme memories, extreme situations, like I don't always like focus on it. I don't like think about it. It kind of goes, it subdues itself, and then I forget about it. And then later on, I remember like, oh, it did correspond to the actual reality, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we can go ahead with some more stories if you want. I mean, we can kind of piece it all together. Yeah, great.
Yeah, and then in 2021, that's 2021, in 2024, um, my mentor, my mentor from college, this professor Rick Jarrow, he died in February 6th, 2024, and in July 21st, 2024, I didn't even realize it was Guru Purnima when I had this vision, but I found out the next day. But I was like, oh, that seemed really synchronistic because I had the vision of him kind of visiting me and saying he's going to help me uh, find my way, find my path, and I had the vision of Rick Jarrow, And then I know it was like this bit of a song he was giving me. I could hear the tune in my head. When I woke up, I heard the tune in my head. It was like, oh, I get it, oh, I get it. And and I was like, what is that song from? What is that song from? And like, I was thinking about it for a long time. I was like, I was amping myself up because I was like, oh, you know, this is an important message for me. Um, and then I was thinking about it. I was like, Hound Dog was coming to me, and I was like, something about a hound dog. And I was like, maybe it's that Elvis song, Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog. And I looked up the Elvis songs and looked up variations on them, and I couldn't figure it out because I Get It wasn't in there. And then finally I was thinking about Dojo and like how training my mind, this is training my mind. And then I looked up Doja Cat. Doja Cat came up in my search, and Doja Cat's song Vegas is the song I was thinking of, where she sings, "Oh, I get it, oh, I get it," at the beginning of the song, and then Ain't Nothing But a Hound Dog, and so it did connect thoroughly through, and then I was like, oh, you know, I have to name myself Vegas and take Rick's last name. I had an R to it though. He spells it Jarrow, and I spelled Jarrow. So I decided to be respectful of the family. You know, I didn't want to feel like I was like getting an official, you know, I didn't get an official clearance. So I thought it was respectful. You know, also I felt more inspired to do that than anything
Yeah.
else. So it's interesting. And then during that time, I was having because I told Rick that I was coming off medications. I wanted to explore my psychic ability, and I wanted to come off psychiatric medications for that reason. But when I came off them, though, I had a vision of, you know, like some kind of alien, you know, presence. Um, and I was looking at I was in my kitchen. And I was looking at the wall, and I was like seeing this vision of microscopic aliens, all this kind of thing, and it was very crazy. But that was interesting, and it was kind of like the idea that first contact would happen in the next 10 years was like something I was thinking about, some kind of contact with like some version of, you know, it may not be from outer space, but some kind of version of interdimensional beings or something like that. I was thinking in terms of kind of like dimensions opening up and like the door opening to another dimension rather than like a complex door open to another dimension rather than coming from outer space, you know? So
Yeah.
yeah, that was interesting. It was an interesting vision. Um, that kind of brought me through the next time. Yeah.
So can you describe the steps of how you went through and connected with the interdimensional?
Well, that was basically like me looking at. I didn't really connect with them because I was delayed, but I was thinking about the door as being a portal. So, and then the door kind of had this microscopic kind of beings associated with it, kind of protecting the door. Um, it was interesting. I kind of like looked at it as like a Link type character, like from The Legend of Zelda, someone like protecting the door or protecting the portal. Um, so I wasn't able to like necessarily overcome that, but I was able to see like this could be potential to do that or overcome that in the future. So that was basically my visioning and boarding of the future. Again, we had the kind of the precognitive vision boarding where, you know, we have like instead of thinking in terms of uh, the planet and space, think in terms of interdimensional beings, like who normal doors can open up and enter into another dimension. So that was kind of the vision of like space travel in that vision, as opposed to like going out into outer space and, you know, finding people rather than that, you know.
So have you been connected or had any experiences with any interdimensional people? I mean, like I hear people are living underneath mountains and oceans and stuff like that. So have you connected with them in any way?
Well, I mean, I think that a lot of the voices or the ideas that I had around that time were like kind of guided by interdimensional beings, um, which I kind of consider like God or consider like kind of some kind of like God or some kind of divine entity. So I don't necessarily consider it secular in that sense. I'm not secularized in that sense. Like I do consider like angels like kind of a thing. So I consider angels to be like interdimensional beings. So I kind of perceive them as like angels more than anything else. I perceive them more as like guiding lights or like guiding beings. The only time where I was like secularizing it was when I was like seeing the portal and I was like, oh, it's a portal to another dimension. But otherwise, normally in my normal waking life, I think of them as guardian angels or angels. And a lot of negotiation around the friendship was like sent by an angel. You know, I think the angel sent her to help me with that part of my life. So I think that I kind of consider it in the religious sense, like an angel or like the angel kind of has dominion over certain job duties, but that they're answerable to God ultimately, you know. So I think like a lot of times I was having like channeling. I was doing a lot of channeling where I was doing a lot of like, writing a script. And then I remember I was writing the script and I was like, oh, the character, we had to go to a more secure channel. And then I realized it was like this messaging I was receiving was I shouldn't be writing this down. I shouldn't be writing it down. I should be like meditating and prayer oriented rather than writing it down in a script. So a lot of the script writing was similar to that. A lot of the creative writing I do, with poetry or all this kind of thing. I've done some poetry as well. It's kind of sacred work. So I've done I self-published two books, Escape from Samsara and Celebrity Sadhana. And then Post Queen's Press published the third book, Breakdown Dancer. And then hopefully I'll publish another book next year. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so you said you channel. So is that the channeling only with the angels, or have you channeled with any other beings?
No, mostly with angels. I try to avoid viewing it any other way because I think the sacred relationship between channel and channeler and channeled, it should be like respectful, in the sense of like there shouldn't be just any being, like, otherwise it gets kind of weird. And and also I think a lot of base emotions are secularized in the sense like when you get angry visions or like this kind of thing, they tend to be like just interdimensional beings, but um, when you get holy, sacred, channeling has to do with divine inspiration and more positive emotions they're associated with. So I try to keep in the positive spectrum rather than, channeling base emotions, which a lot of times can be negative or a lot of times can be kind of like toxic.
Yeah, yeah. You had another vision that came up, and you were talking about 9/11, or not
Yeah.
9/11, I'm sorry, COVID.
COVID. Yeah. 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 I
Yeah,
felt I had this great presence of a global crisis. And that made me think about because when 9/11 hit, actually I got very high alert. I went to very high alert. I was like my sensitivity went up. And I was like, oh, I think I should have been aware of that. It almost felt like, after 9/11 happened that I should have known about that. Almost the feeling came up in me. Um, and that therefore, when COVID hit, it was almost like a relapse from 9/11 because I was like, or connection to 9/11 because I was like, oh, the next crisis is going to hit, and I felt like it was almost 9/11 style crisis, before in 2018 or 2019. It was like late 2018, borderlining in 2019, where I was like, the next major global crisis is going to hit, and it's going to be not just America, it's going to affect the world. Um, so that did have a direct connection to 9/11 in the sense that, when 9/11 hit, I felt like, oh, I should have been aware of that, almost like kind of a thing. Because I was very much heightened and I was like, um, I wanted to like serve the Lord kind of a thing. I want to be a part of the ongoing struggle with religious ideology and understand what does it mean to be truly serve the Lord rather than falsely serving the Lord. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Do you feel like that you've had this um this skill since childhood? Do you feel like looking back, do you think you've had this longer than what you're thinking now?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I always been sensitive to the energies, and I think like having grown up in the Sathya Sai Baba fold, like having Sathya Sai Baba as like a guru who's like very highly sensitive to manifestation work and highly sensitive to supernatural things. Sai Baba was a little bit of a supernatural guru. Um, he like manifested. He would wave his hand and then conjure up material objects, or conjure up sacred ash. Um, he was a conjurer, and but he was, considered God or considered this Lord or spiritual entity. He preached from the Vedas. So I think like definitely, I remember I would like jump up out of bed, and like I had this nightmare that I got sucked into another dimension when I jumped up, when I kind of threw my feet into the air. I remember I got a nightmare that I was like sucked into another dimension, and I stopped doing that. But then I was thinking later, I was like, oh, maybe I was sucked into another dimension, and I was like gifted with this ability to see things.
Yeah. How did your family react, or did you tell your family?
Well, I've told them a little bit of it, but they don't really understand because a lot of times they conflate it with mental illness. Kind of like I was diagnosed bipolar at a young age. So I think a lot of times it get confused with mental illness. Um, so I think like, the sensitivity. So a lot of times I'll know things that I shouldn't know, and it becomes paranoia kind of a thing. So it can devolve into paranoia when you kind of have a feeling like something that you shouldn't know. Um, so I guess that can devolve into paranoia, and I think that it's unfortunate that not many people understand or believe you when you're saying like, these kinds of things.
Yeah, yeah, that's why I'm doing the show. So
Yeah.
let people know, um, do you have any siblings or anything that may have this also and might be, are they using it or are they hiding it?
Yeah, my sister is a doctor, so she's pretty much subdued you know, her psychic ability to like, working with the physician realm. Although sometimes I feel like she has she's attuned as well. But she has her own life as a physician, so she's more scientifically inspired and more like inspired by that. And she might interpret my feelings or experiences of mental illness. So she considers it constant instability rather than a deeper sense of, you know, um, spiritual insight.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. That makes it tough for you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I also had this shirt on Occam's Razor, which is pretty interesting because like Occam's Razor, the premise is the most simple explanation is most likely the reasonable one. And in the face of, um, strange occurrences, a lot of times the simplest explanation is mental illness, but um also it could be just be like coincidence or synchronicity in the Jungian sense. Jungian psychology goes into synchronicity and meaningful coincidences,
Mhm.
in the sense of like, even though they're acausal coincidences where they just synchronize up, they just sync up.
Yeah, yeah. Well, have you had any of like a deja vu type stuff when you're doing these visions?
Oh
Because I'm
yeah,
sure
definitely, definitely.
I could
Yeah,
see
I
that.
definitely, yeah, definitely. Like I had a feeling like during Lost, I had a feeling like something strange was happening. I really loved Lost, but I really enjoyed the show. But the whole time I'm watching it, I'm like, this seems like I could predict what was going to happen. I consciously remember that I had written out the show. I definitely had this feeling of like eerie familiarity with it. Um, and sometimes I would have a quick vision of like, oh yeah, I did write the show. I did kind of like write out these plot points with a flash forward, flash sideways, and flashbacks, all this kind of thing. And I kind of knew where they're going with it, but I didn't want to go out there and stick my neck out and like, go out to the public and be like, they're gonna flash sideways now, or they're gonna flash forward now, or whatever it is. I could have done that. I mean, if I really was confident in myself, and if I didn't have the mental health background, then maybe I would have, been a little bit more aggressive around asserting myself around while the show was going on, and been like, oh, I had this idea, and like I know where the show's gonna go, kind of a thing. But I wasn't so confident, and I was kind of scared at some level of this ability,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. Um, you spoke about some you spoke about you doing some essays with red hats and white
Oh
hats.
yeah.
Can you talk about that?
Yeah, it was interesting because I wrote an essay in Vassar College about white hat people, and ultimately it's interesting how the parallel. I was like, we were talking about segregation in the college, and we were talking about how like minorities tend to stick together in their own groups, and white students would stay together in their own groups, and then there's very little interaction between the different communities. And even Vassar College is a very progressive school, is a very progressive liberal school, but still the natural tendency of the community was to gather around race. And I was saying how a lot of these very conservative kids from very conservative school backgrounds were wearing white hats and, partying hard and saying, things like, conservative mottos. And then we were reading it again to the Trump era. And my friend was like, "Oh, it's like red hats now with the MAGA thing." So she was like very eerily reminiscent. So some of the writing was that's a little lesser coincidence, but another lesser coincidence was I'd written a story in fourth grade called Professor Waz in the Land of Oz, which is a kind of derivative from Land of Oz. But there, the characters are reading books, and they're face stuck in a book all the time, and they're like all the time looking at their book. And like my friend was like, oh, it's similar to phones now, where they're looking at their phone all the time and scrolling their phone. Um, so she said that also was kind of eerily reminiscent of the future. Because when you're done with the future, though, like it's hard to describe it because we don't have the vocabulary to talk about it in these terms. So it's hard even to say whether a portal to another dimension is the appropriate um, phraseology they'd use 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Maybe they'll say it as teleportation in the sense of like going from one place to another, going from one location to another. Maybe they'll use some other word to describe it. But the basic idea of a threshold between here and another place being ellipsed is the basic premise there, is the idea of like conquering the space-time, being able to conquer time, space, um, is the basic premise there. So when you see a vision of the future, like we don't have the necessary vocabulary to describe it, so we have to use words that are familiar to us now. So a lot of times, like I've encountered that problem where it's like I don't know how to describe it, so I use kind of rudimentary words, and then later it'll make sense to me later. Oh, that's what I meant to say. That's what I intended to say, which is how it unfolded. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you had some dreams as a child.
yeah,
So, that you were pulled out of your bed.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's so incredible. It's incredible, like the dreams I had, and like the dreams of like I have a whole book now of dream poems where I like talk about transcription of dreams, translate the sweetness I call it, and hopefully that'll get published next year. But translate the sweetness is a transcription of dreams, where a lot of them are kind of funny dreams or interesting dreams. They're not so much prophetic dreams, but a lot of times interesting. Some of them are kind of have the prophetic aspect to it. They some have a poetic kind of ring to it. where it's like you're looking at the kind of manifestation work and how um, we create the world we live in. So something to just kind of indicate that kind of philosophy of like we create the world we live in, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have you had any, just curious, if you've had any repeating dreams and what do you feel those mean?
Yeah, I've had repeating dreams of like invader dreams, where like I'm in the bed and like I'm in the dream I'm in the bed and someone's trying to break into the house. And the various locations I've lived in, it's changed over the years. But same dream where they're trying to break into the house, and sometimes they get in and they set up a picnic in the kitchen, and they're eating and they're having a good time, having a jolly old time, and I'm like sitting there sleeping. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? It's so strange. I recounted that in the uh, poetry collection. Um, And then that's in a recurring dream. And I think definitely like personal space, personal boundaries, it has to do with, it has to do with like kind of like feeling invaded or feeling, kind of the kind of feelings of suspiciousness, all those kind of things. And have been a theme. So I think definitely like that idea of like personal space is like personal boundaries is like recurrent there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've had a recurring dream when I was a child. I was around 6 when this dream happened for like a week at a time, and I still remember it. And it's just like really weird,
Yeah.
crazy kind of dreams. But yeah, they do have meaning. I believe they all have meaning. Just got to check them out and see what they are. So, do you do
Yeah.
any work of doing any dream readings, or do you do that for people, or do
Yeah,
you
I've
do?
I've I've had as a clinician I've invited dreams into the space, and I think I've had some interesting clients bring some interesting dreams up. And I think it's easy for me to dictate the meaning, but I like to generate meaning from the client. A lot of times I use an associative methodology where it's like Jungian psychology tends to associate what. So if you see a cup in your dream, coffee cup in your dream, instead of saying, "Oh, it means this," coffee cup means this and that. You're like, "What do you associate with coffee cups?" And then maybe a memory of childhood comes up, seeing your father or something like that, drink coffee, and then you're like, "Oh, the coffee cup has to do with your father," like rather than directly having to do with coffee or percolating or, like for example, when you free associate from the symbols in the dream, a lot of times you find deeper meaning than if you like just translate the symbol directly.
Oh, that's a different way. I haven't heard that. That's pretty cool. That's
Yeah,
pretty
I
cool
think
to
I
look
think
at it that
Jungians
way.
do that.
Yeah.
I think Jungians do that. That's my understanding of what Jungians do. They kind of have free association and they kind of circumambulate the topics. You keep returning to coffee and you keep associating from coffee.
Hmm. That's
Yeah.
interesting. That's interesting. Yeah. So, and this one, do you had one that it pulled you out of your bed and into space?
Yeah, we mentioned that.
Been
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, it was basically like I had this distinct dream of like, getting pulled into another dimension kind of a thing. Again, I usually think of it in terms of dimensional understandings. Um, and that was kind of like the understanding I had because I would jump up from bed. I would like throw my feet up in the air. I was lying down, I would throw my feet up in the air and then um, push myself out of bed from jumping position. So, so in the dream, I was like throwing my feet up, and then it got caught in the middle of the air and get pulled up. I pulled into the fold. Um, so it's very interesting. I think like the idea of dimensions is interesting because it's like the idea that consciousness is a film that exists in your mind is important to recognize because ultimately we have 8 billion films that are running in the world rather than us sitting on a planet, other than 8 billion people on a planet. Like the traditional perspective is we're 8 billion people on a planet, and that this planet is hovering in space, and that there's a sun, a moon, and several planets. But and from this point of view, dimensional point of view, there are 8 billion movies that are running, or more, infinite number of movies that are running in people's heads. And the projectors obviously are our eyes, and we're kind of looking out into the film of this the ether, rather than a planet, the reality ether of like undifferentiated material. And then we're discriminating in this ether for the objects that we see. Um, so, in other words, like there's no set reality outside of our consciousness. It's all kind of produced by consciousness.
Hmm.
Yeah. It's
Do
very
you,
high
but
metaphysics. Yeah, very high metaphysics.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think that's part of time travel?
Yeah, I think time travel has to do with, well, I mean, you can't go to time travel without bringing other consciousnesses with you because we're constantly moving through time. So, the only thing we can do, the best we can do is see ahead into the future, and see ahead into the stream of where we're all going. Like we're on the stream of consciousness and kind of see ahead down the river. That's the best we can really see is be able to see the future and be able to see like, oh, I choose now to go down this inlet of the rapids rather than that inlet. So we can really direct our life in a certain way, and that give me the power to direct my life in a certain way. And I wanted to be able, even though like it's been very difficult to transition from library science to mental health counseling. I'm hoping my PhD in mythopoetics will make a difference in people's lives. And I'll be able to write a dissertation that does honor to this field um, of study. And I think that definitely, I think like the idea of the paranormal is important. Jungian psychology had a lot to do with the paranormal. Jungian psychology had a lot to do with the paranormal. He was like investigating the paranormal, UFOs, and he was investigating a lot of psychic abilities in his papers. So I'd like to continue that work. Yeah.
So, have you had any experiences with um, anything else? Have you seen a UFO? Have you experienced anything like that? Or is it just the angels at all?
Well, I haven't visually seen them, but I definitely have felt the presence of an angel. And I felt the presence of these beings. Deeply felt the presence of them. Um, and the only time I hallucinated or the time I had like a little bit of a visual thing was with the door and seeing the Link character guarding the door. Um, so that was kind of like a kind of a visual cue there. For the most part, I just experienced the presence of a loving presence of like an angel kind of guiding me, especially in that 2018 episode where I was like, asking for a friendship, and I was like, because the Lord wanted me to do a specific thing, which is change careers and end up in this mental health counseling degree program. But I was like, it'd help me if I had a guide for that. And I kind of negotiated to have a guide for that, something to guide me and help me bring me out of my comfort zone into this new zone. And the friend did come into my life, and she brought me to a mentor who helped me out a lot in revisioning my life.
How would you describe how to connect with a guide or an angel like this?
Yeah, I think definitely letting go of attachments is important. I think like, with these kinds of things, when you let go of specific, you focus on the feelings rather than the experiences, rather than the specifics will come down the road, but when you focus on the experience you want to have, however specific I was also not being specific. Like it was like I was being very specific, and yeah, I wasn't being very specific. Like it was more a type of experience I wanted to have rather than spelling it out. So I was like, oh, and then a mutual friend will contact me and tell me they have a problem and I'm gonna help them solve the problem. And they'll, you know what I mean? Like, it was like that kind of thing. I was like, so that's very non-specific. It's very general, and yet at the same time, it's very specific. Like a mutual friend, and it will help us get deeper connection. So it's like the finding the right note of like I want to experience helping people. Um, is the point is asking for an experience rather than like, oh, I want this specific person to do this specific thing. Like I want my ex-boyfriend to call me back or whatever, or my ex-girlfriend to call me back. Is not helpful. But lost love, I want to rekindle lost love is like more of how I manifestation works. So when you're like talking generally, but also specifically without names involved, there's all these things I didn't have the name involved. I didn't have I didn't even met the person. So I didn't have a specific person like I want this person to play this role in my life. I was just like more about generally I wanted a person to come up in my life who would, be interested in my materials and poetry and in the open mics and in the Truth to Power show, the podcast I run. And of course, when that happened, I was thinking, oh, see, I wished for someone to help me produce the show. I was just going with the flow. And then later I was thinking, oh, wow, that's exactly what I asked for, you know? So it's both specific and hyper general, you know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So, do you have any other kind of experiences you've had with any of this? Any experiences that surprised you? Any experiences that made you kind of jump back and say, "Whoa, what's going on here?" Or
Yeah, definitely. I think like with the Rick Jarrow thing, like it surprised me a lot because I hadn't expected like to get a visitation, and I think like and I hadn't expected to change my name obviously. And I haven't like officially changed my name, but I tried to officially change my name. Um, but that definitely was a surprise, and like it was a pleasant surprise because I feel like we had talked a lot before before his death. About mental health and the alliance between the spiritual and mental health, like how people who are considered mentally ill in this society might be aligned in another society. It's just a question of the pressures of capitalism and the pressures of late stage capitalism, the pressures of all these kind of things that create toxicity in our environment. But actually, there's quite aligned in the spiritual sense. Um, so that definitely surprised me. And I remember I was listening to some harmonium um, videos, and I was imagining, or I was kind of listening to him playing the harmonium. So he used to play the harmonium a lot. So kind of like I was listening to the videos of the spiritual songs, thinking about him and thinking about his life and all this kind of thing. So that definitely was
yeah,
surprising, a very surprised thing. Yeah.
yeah. Um, I had another question for you here. I just spaced it.
Yeah.
um, so yeah, I mean, we'll just kind of keep going with some questions that my questions will come back. It'll come back.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's interesting how planning and not planning, how I basically was not planning all these things, but then you have to forget about it. You can't like hold on to it. You can't hold on too tightly. Because like the more you hold on to it, the more it interferes in your ability to actually implement the vision, you know? So sometimes forgetting is part of the equation. Like when you make a sincere request, you have to forget the request, you know? So I think
Mhm.
memory and forgetting is important because you have to like kind of forget the request and then later on you see the connection later on, and you can't really record it. I mean, this is an exception, but because already I'm talking about things in the past, but You can only record it because like you have to kind of put the deep into the subconscious of the universe, you know, deep in the subconscious universe. So that then the universe will provide you with that experience, you know.
So when you have manifested some things, how long did that take you to have that manifestation come about?
Yeah, it took a long time. I mean, like 2018, like took a good. Well, I mean, like I made the request again the weekend before I met her, met the woman who changed my life. Um, so in that sense, it was quick. But when I first made the request, it was 2018. So it took a good year for it to kind of propagate in the system. And then 1998 is when I kind of, I was joking with my friend Tim. I was like, oh, it'd be great if this show were to happen, even outside of my influence. I would love this show to happen. And then it took to 2004 for them to actually produce it or premiere it. Um, but the point is, like, I was like, oh, I just want to put this request into the universe and have this show go on. And it's interesting how it does take a little while for things to propagate. Um, and I think like, it be not being like my show is interesting. Like, it's interesting how, like, I had pretty much all the equations of the show spelt out. Um, and just like that, I had all the ins and outs of our relationship spelled out. Um, Kind of the different aspects of, how she related with me and how I related with the mentor. Um, so I had like two mentors at that time. And Rick ended up telling me to go to that mentor because he was like, you should connect with him more. So when I had the vision of him after his death, he was like, see, I sent you that mentor to help you. Because Rick and I never had the same relationship I had with him, with this guy, Ken Furlick, who is ryuc.info is his website, releasing your limited creativity. Um, so he had a very close relationship with me and helping me out, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So you've done a lot of stuff. You've got yourself into the mental field. That was one of my questions. With the mental field, do you feel like more diagnoses are more towards a spiritual realm than a medical realm, such as example, um, like a bipolar that is more spiritual, or like a multi-personality is more spiritual than medical. So you're feeling there's more spiritual with all of this than medical.
Yeah, I think definitely we have to be, the answer comes from a combination of both, but I mean, ultimately, I don't think we can deny the fact that medications have an impact. Um, but they don't have an impact. But the point is, psychiatry has not understood kind of why it has an impact and like what the reason they blame biology or they hereditary or DNA and all this kind of thing. They talk about, but I think like ultimately we have to be more empowering to the individual that their creativity or their consciousness has something to do with it. And consciousness studies is underappreciated and underexplored. Conscious studies in relation to the spiritual realms. Jungian psychology was pioneering it. And Jungian psychology really has a lot of the benefits of combining spiritual psychology or transpersonal psychology with mainstream psychology. Um, so I definitely think like, there's a lot more to be said than just taking a pill, like there's a lot more to be said in that front. Um, and I think that when it comes to mythopoetics of mental illness, not the myth of mental illness, but the mythopoetics of mental illness. Myth of mental illness is by Thomas Zaz, but he wrote about how personal responsibility and all this kind of thing. But I think like when it comes to and how like mental illness or schizophrenia is like an objection to capitalist society, conscientious objector. But at the same time, I think that there's a spiritual realm to it as well. So I call it the mythopoetics of mental illness, where it's like, we have to understand the spiritual beings are calling these people to be conscious objectors.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I think there's a lot more spiritual into these diagnoses than medical.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. So is
Yeah.
there anything else you'd like to share before we close up for the time?
Yeah, that's about it. But I think like it's important to recognize that if people want to get in touch with their intuition, they should kind of let go of appearances in the sense of like, this has to do with you or me, but rather has to do with the energy signature or the experience we're having with these people, and not get too fixated on individual people who are causing me problems, but rather the movements in our life, they're the energetic movements or signatures in life that are kind of creating tensions, and then we can kind of navigate, reorchestrating those tensions in that sense. No one person is gonna, no one person is gonna say something individually. There's gonna be always gonna be many people who are doing the same thing. There's always going to be like several people in your life who are of the same energy. So the more you think about energies, the more open you are to the possibilities of the math or the statistics of, like, I'll conjure up another person of the same energy, of the same ilk, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So keep your mind open and manifest what you're after then.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate that. And if there's anyone else out there that has a story to share, email me at lighttalk423 at gmail.com and we will chat and see if we can get you on the show. So, yeah, we will talk with everybody next time. All right. Bye.
Bye.